In a small, cozy diner tucked away on the outskirts of Chicago, Sarah Anderson spent most of her days balancing trays, pouring coffee, and greeting customers with a warm smile. The diner wasn't fancy. It had peeling wallpaper, mismatched chairs, and a jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. But it was Sarah's second home. She worked tirelessly, clocking in long hours to make ends meet. Her paycheck barely covered rent, but she never complained. Instead, she saved every tip she earned, carefully stashing them away in a jar hidden under her bed. Those coins and crumpled bills were more than just savings. They represented her dream, a dream of opening her own cafe someday. Sarah was only 24, but life hadn't been kind to her. Her parents passed away when she was young, leaving her to fend for herself. She dropped out of college after 2 semesters because tuition fees were too high, and since then she had been working odd jobs to survive. Despite the hardships, Sarah remained hopeful. She believed that if she worked hard enough, one day she'd escape the endless cycle of serving others and build something of her own. Her dream cafe would be different from any other place in town. It would have comfortable seating, soft lighting, and the smell of freshly baked pastries wafting through the air. People would come not just for food or coffee, but for the warmth and comfort the cafe offered. That vision kept her going even on the toughest days. Every Thursday evening, a man named Ethan Carter came into the diner. He always sat at the same corner booth by the window, where he could watch the world outside while sipping his black coffee. At first, Sarah didn't think much of him. He was just another customer, albeit one who tipped generously and always left polite compliments about the service. But over time, their interactions became more frequent. Ethan started asking questions about her day, her dreams, her plans for the future. Sarah found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone else. There was something about Ethan that made her feel seen, heard, and valued. He listened intently, his eyes never straying from hers, and he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. As weeks turned into months, their conversations grew longer, deeper, and more personal. One evening, as Sarah refilled his coffee cup, Ethan asked, "Do you ever get tired of this? Working so hard without knowing if your dreams will come true?" His question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before, at least not in such a direct way. For a moment she hesitated, unsure how to respond. Then, gathering her thoughts, she said, "Of course I get tired sometimes, but giving up isn't an option. If I stop trying, then all those sacrifices I've made won't mean anything." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, impressed by her determination. From that day forward, their bond strengthened. They began meeting outside the diner, too, walking along the riverfront, sharing meals at quiet restaurants, and talking late into the night. Ethan was unlike anyone Sarah had ever met. He was smart, ambitious, and driven, yet he carried a kindness that put people at ease. He spoke passionately about his work, explaining how he wanted to create technology that would change lives. Sarah admired his vision, and in return, Ethan encouraged her to pursue her dream of opening a cafe. "You're stronger than you think," he told her once. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." For nearly 6 months, Sarah and Ethan dated in secret. Their relationship blossomed quietly, away from prying eyes and judgmental whispers. To everyone else, Ethan was just another regular customer at the diner. But to Sarah, he was everything. Her confidant, her cheerleader, her partner. She couldn't imagine her life without him anymore. Then one day, everything changed. It started with little signs that something was off. Ethan stopped showing up at the diner as often as he used to. When he did come, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and cutting their conversation short. Sarah tried not to read too much into it, telling herself that maybe he was just busy with work. After all, he had mentioned being involved in a big project. Still, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. And then, one Thursday evening, Ethan didn't show up at all. At first, Sarah convinced herself it was nothing. Maybe he was stuck in traffic or tied up in meetings. But as days turned into weeks, reality sank in. He wasn't coming back. Ethan vanished without a trace. No calls, no texts, no explanations. It was as though he had disappeared from her life completely. The pain of his absence hit Sarah like a tidal wave. She replayed their last conversation over and over in her head, searching for clues she might have missed. Had she said something wrong? Was it something she did? Or was it simply that Ethan got tired of her and decided to move on? Sarah tried reaching out to him multiple times, calling his number and sending messages that went unanswered. Eventually, she gave up. The man who had once filled her world with hope and happiness was gone, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. Heartbroken but unwilling to give up on her dreams, Sarah threw herself back into work. She poured all her energy into saving money for her cafe, using it as a distraction from the ache in her chest. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't forget Ethan. Every time she served a customer at the corner booth, memories of him flooded back, making her heart clench with longing. Little did Sarah know fate had other plans. Years later, when she least expected it, Ethan would reappear in her life. Not as the man she once loved, but as someone entirely different. And when that moment came, Sarah's world would be turned upside down once again. Until then, she continued, living her life, one cup of coffee at a time, holding on to the hope that someday, somehow, things would make sense again. While Sarah struggled to piece her life back together in the diner, Ethan Carter's world was transforming in ways he could never have imagined. After disappearing from Sarah's life, Ethan threw himself into his work with relentless determination. He had always been ambitious, but now his drive bordered on obsession. Every hour of every day was spent building his tech startup, a small company that specialized in artificial intelligence solutions for businesses. At first, progress was slow, and setbacks were frequent. Funding was tight, investors were skeptical, and sleepless nights became his norm. But Ethan refused to give up. He believed wholeheartedly in his vision, even when others doubted him. Ethan's breakthrough came unexpectedly. One evening, while presenting his prototype at a local tech conference, he caught the attention of a prominent venture capitalist named Richard Langley. Impressed by Ethan's innovative ideas and charismatic pitch, Richard decided to invest heavily in the company. With this financial backing, Ethan's startup skyrocketed. Within months, they launched their flagship product, a cutting-edge AI platform designed to streamline business operations, and it quickly gained traction across industries. Companies large and small began adopting the technology, praising its efficiency and reliability. As the company grew, so did Ethan's reputation. He went from being an unknown entrepreneur to a celebrated figure in the tech world. Magazines featured him on their covers, calling him a visionary and a game changer. Business conferences invited him to speak, eager to hear about his journey and learn from his success. His name became synonymous with innovation, and soon enough, he was worth billions. Despite his newfound fame and fortune, however, Ethan wasn't happy. Beneath the polished suits, luxurious cars, and sprawling penthouse apartment, he carried a weight he couldn't shake, the guilt of leaving Sarah behind. In quieter moments, when the noise of boardroom meetings and media interviews faded away, Ethan found himself thinking about her. He remembered the warmth of her smile, the way she lit up when talking about her dreams, and the countless evenings they spent sharing stories over coffee. Those memories haunted him, reminding him of the person he used to be before ambition consumed him entirely. "I did it for us," Ethan often told himself, trying to justify his decision. When he left Sarah, he truly believed it was for the best. Starting a business required sacrifices, long hours, endless stress, and constant uncertainty. And he didn't want to drag her into that chaos. He convinced himself that once he achieved success, he'd return to her and make things right. But as time passed, returning felt impossible. The gap between them widened with each passing year, until Ethan convinced himself it was too late. Sarah had probably moved on, built a new life, and forgotten about him altogether. Still, there were moments when Ethan allowed himself to wonder, what if he had stayed? Would they still be together? Would she have supported him through the highs and lows of entrepreneurship? These questions lingered in the corners of his mind, unanswered yet persistent. One evening, after attending a charity gala hosted by his company, Ethan stepped outside for some fresh air. The event was held at a luxury hotel downtown, far removed from the modest diner where he used to meet Sarah. As he walked along the sidewalk, lost in thought, nostalgia tugged at him. Without realizing it, his feet carried him toward familiar territory, the diner where everything had begun. The streets were quieter here, lined with older buildings and mom-and-pop shops. When Ethan reached the diner, he hesitated for a moment, staring at its neon sign flickering against the night sky. Memories flooded back, the sound of Sarah's laughter, the clinking of coffee cups, the way sunlight streamed through the windows during their afternoon chats. It felt surreal to stand there again years later as a completely different person. Curiosity got the better of him, and Ethan pushed open the door. The bell above it chimed softly, announcing his arrival. Inside, the diner looked exactly how he remembered it, cozy, unpretentious, and filled with charm. The jukebox played an old tune, and the smell of fried food mingled with freshly brewed coffee. For a brief moment, Ethan felt like he had stepped back in time. He took a seat at the corner booth by the window, the same spot where he used to sit, with Sarah. As he glanced around the room, he noticed subtle changes. A new coat of paint on the walls, updated menus laminated in plastic, but the essence of the place remained untouched. A waitress approached him, notepad in hand, ready to take his order. Ethan barely registered her presence, lost in his thoughts. "Can I take your order?" the waitress asked politely. Ethan looked up, startled. His breath hitched as recognition dawned on him. Standing before him was Sarah. She looked older, more mature, but unmistakably the same woman who had once captured his heart. Her hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and she wore the same uniform she had worn years ago. Her expression was calm, professional, but there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes as she recognized him too. For a split second, neither of them spoke. Time seemed to freeze as they stared at each other, the weight of unspoken emotions hanging, heavy in the air. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Ethan swallowed hard, struggling to find words. "A cup of black coffee," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. It was the same drink he used to order during their dates, a detail that didn't escape Sarah's notice. As Sarah turned to leave, Ethan called out impulsively, "Wait, please." She stopped but didn't look back. "I'm sorry," he said softly, the sincerity in his tone undeniable. Those two words hung in the air, lingering long after Sarah walked away. Ethan sat there, staring at the empty seat across from him, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. Guilt, regret, longing, they all collided within him, leaving him unsure of what to do next. He hadn't planned for this encounter, hadn't prepared himself for the reality of facing Sarah again. Yet here she was, standing just a few feet away, serving him coffee as though nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Sarah returned to the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared Ethan's order. Seeing him again stirred up feelings she thought she had buried years ago. Anger, sadness, confusion. It all came rushing back in waves. Part of her wanted to confront him, demand answers, and unleash the pain he had caused her. But another part of her, the stronger, more cautious part, told her to keep her distance. Whatever Ethan wanted, whatever he hoped to achieve by walking back into her life, she wasn't ready to let him in. Not yet. When Sarah brought the coffee to his table, she placed it down gently, avoiding eye contact. "Here you go," she said curtly, turning to leave without waiting for a response. But Ethan reached out, grabbing her wrist lightly to stop her. Startled, Sarah looked at him, her eyes flashing with a mixture of irritation and vulnerability. "Sarah," Ethan began, his voice earnest. "Please let me explain." She hesitated, torn between walking away and staying to hear him out. After a moment of silence, she sighed deeply and nodded. "Fine," she said quietly, "but make it quick." Ethan released her wrist, relief washing over him. This was his chance, a fragile opportunity to mend the damage he had caused. As Sarah stood there, arms crossed and eyes narrowed, Ethan knew he had a lot of explaining to do. Whether she would forgive him or not remained uncertain. But one thing was clear. Their story wasn't over yet. Outside, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside the diner. Inside, two people faced each other, separated by years of silence, betrayal, and unresolved emotions. Little did they know, this unexpected reunion would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as Ethan's grip on her wrist loosened. His touch was gentle, almost hesitant, but it sent a jolt of emotions rushing through her. She wanted to yank her hand away, to walk off and pretend this moment wasn't happening, but something stopped her. Curiosity, anger, or maybe the faintest sliver of hope that she could finally understand why he had left her all those years ago. Whatever it was, she stayed rooted to the spot, staring at him with a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Explain what?" Sarah asked sharply, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the diner. "Why you disappeared without a word, or how you became some big-shot billionaire while I'm still stuck here serving coffee." Her words came out harsher than she intended, but she didn't care. The bitterness she had buried for so long was bubbling to the surface now, raw and unfiltered. Ethan flinched at her tone, guilt washing over him like a tidal wave. He deserved every ounce of her anger. He knew that. But hearing it spoken aloud made his stomach churn. For a moment he struggled to find the right words, his mind racing to piece together an explanation that wouldn't sound hollow or self-serving. Finally, he took a deep breath and began. "I know I hurt you, Sarah. More than you'll ever know," he said softly, his voice heavy with regret. "And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to understand why I did what I did." Sarah crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her defenses up. "Go on," she said coldly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "When we were together, my startup was barely getting off the ground. I was working 18-hour days, fighting to keep the company afloat. Every decision felt like life or death, and the pressure, it was suffocating." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I thought staying with you would only make things harder, for both of us. I convinced myself that if I focused solely on the business, I could build something stable, something secure, something worthy of you." Sarah scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief. "So you just decided to leave? Without even talking to me about it? Did you ever stop to think how I might feel?" "No," Ethan admitted, lowering his gaze. "I didn't. And that's the biggest mistake I've ever made. I was selfish, Sarah. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now how wrong I was. Leaving you wasn't noble. It was cowardly." The honesty in his voice caught Sarah off guard. She had expected excuses, defensiveness, maybe even arrogance, given his newfound status as a billionaire. But instead he sat there, vulnerable and remorseful, baring his soul to her. It didn't erase the pain he had caused, but it softened her anger just enough to let him continue. "I built the company, yes," Ethan went on, "but none of it felt real without you. Success isn't worth much when you're alone, Sarah. I've spent years trying to fill the void you left behind, but nothing has worked. Money doesn't fix loneliness." Sarah's expression softened slightly, though she still kept her guard up. "So what are you saying, Ethan? That you regret leaving me? That you want to pick up where we left off?" She laughed bitterly, shaking her head again. "It doesn't work like that. You can't just walk back into someone's life after abandoning them and expect everything to be okay." "You're right," Ethan said quickly. "I don't expect anything from you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your trust, but I had to try. I owed it to you to explain, to apologize." His sincerity was undeniable, and Sarah found herself grappling with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to lash out, to tell him exactly how much he had hurt her and walk away forever. Another part of her, a quieter, more forgiving part, wondered if there was still a chance to salvage something between them. Could they start over? Or was too much damage already done? The diner grew quieter around them as other customers finished their meals and left. Only a few stragglers remained, engrossed in their own conversations. The jukebox switched songs, filling the room with the soft melody of an old love ballad. Neither Sarah nor Ethan noticed. They were too consumed by the intensity of the moment. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "You say you regret leaving me," she said slowly, her voice steadier now. "But do you even know what it was like for me? Do you have any idea how broken I felt when you vanished without a trace?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "I can't imagine how painful it must have been, but I want to understand. If you'll let me, I want to make amends, not because I think I deserve it, but because I owe it to you." Sarah studied him closely, searching for signs of dishonesty or manipulation, but all she saw was genuine remorse etched into his features. Still, she wasn't ready to let him off the hook completely. "Let's say I believe you," she said cautiously. "What happens next? Are you going to stick around this time, or will you disappear again when things get tough?" Ethan met her gaze, his eyes filled with determination. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah, not unless you tell me to leave. I've learned my lesson, the hard way, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." Sarah sighed deeply, torn between skepticism and hope. Trust wasn't something she could give easily, especially not to someone who had shattered it once before. But Ethan's apology seemed sincere, and his willingness to face her anger spoke volumes. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for redemption. "Okay," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "If you're serious about making things right, then prove it. Don't just talk about changing, show me." Relief washed over Ethan's face, though he knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. Earning Sarah's forgiveness wouldn't happen overnight, and he understood that. But for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that he could repair the damage he had caused. Hope that he could rebuild the connection they once shared. As Sarah turned to leave, heading back toward the counter, Ethan called out one last time. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for listening, for giving me a chance." Sarah glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "This isn't forgiveness. It's a test." With that, she walked away, leaving Ethan sitting alone in the booth. He watched her go, his mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it. Whatever it took, he vowed to prove to Sarah that he was no longer the man who abandoned her. He was someone better, or at least he hoped to become one. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside the diner. Inside, two people stood at a crossroads, unsure of where their story would lead next. One thing was certain, though. This encounter had reignited something neither of them could ignore. Whether it would lead to reconciliation or further heartache remained to be seen. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face, the earnestness in his gaze, the vulnerability in his voice. It unsettled her. She had spent years building walls around her heart to protect herself from being hurt again. But now those walls felt shaky, as if they might crumble under the weight of Ethan's apology. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between anger and curiosity, resentment and hope. One evening, after closing the diner, Sarah sat alone at one of the booths, staring blankly at the empty coffee cups scattered across the table. The diner was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. This place had been her refuge during some of the darkest moments of her life, but tonight it offered no comfort. Instead, it reminded her of Ethan, of the laughter they had shared here, the dreams they had discussed, and ultimately the pain he had caused when he walked out on her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Startled, she looked up to see Ethan standing outside, his hands shoved into the pockets of his coat. His expression was hesitant, almost apologetic, as if he wasn't sure whether he should be there. For a moment, Sarah considered ignoring him, pretending she hadn't seen him. But something stopped her. a mixture of curiosity and an unspoken need to confront him once and for all. Reluctantly, she got up and unlocked the door. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sharp but not entirely unwelcoming. "Needed to see you," Ethan replied honestly. "I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you, but I can't just walk away without trying to make things right." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Closing the door behind him, she crossed her arms over her chest, maintaining a safe distance. "You've already apologized, Ethan. What more do you want?" "I want to understand," he said, softly. "I want to know how I hurt you. Not just so I can feel guilty, but so I can learn. So I can be better." His words caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before, not with such sincerity. Still, she wasn't ready to open up completely. "Why does it matter now? You left me years ago. Why suddenly care about my feelings?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I never stopped caring, Sarah. Even when I convinced myself it was for the best, even when I told myself you'd moved on, I couldn't stop thinking about you, about us. I thought success would fill the emptiness, but it didn't. All I could think about was how I ruined the one thing that truly mattered." Sarah's defenses wavered slightly at his admission. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the bitterness that had kept her going all these years, but it was becoming harder to ignore the honesty in his voice. "Do you have any idea what it was like for me?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Do you know what it feels like to wake up every day wondering why someone who claimed to love you just disappeared?" Ethan winced, guilt gnawing at him. "No, I don't. And I'll never fully understand because I wasn't the one left behind. But I want to try. Tell me, Sarah, please." She stared at him, searching his eyes for any trace of insincerity. When she found none, she finally gave in, letting the floodgates open. "It was hell," she admitted, her voice breaking. "For months, I kept waiting for you to come back. I called your number so many times, sent messages, begged for answers, but you never responded. Eventually, I stopped trying. I told myself you didn't care, that I wasn't important enough to fight for. And maybe you weren't. Maybe I was just a distraction while you built your empire." "That's not true," Ethan interjected quickly. "You were never a distraction, Sarah. You were the reason I kept going some days. Thinking about you, about the future we could have had, it pushed me to work harder, to dream bigger. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really mattered. I let fear and ambition blind me." Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Fear doesn't excuse what you did, Ethan. You abandoned me. You made me feel worthless, like I wasn't good enough for you." "You are more than enough," Ethan insisted, stepping closer to her. "You always were. I was the one who wasn't ready. I was scared, Sarah. Scared of failing, scared of losing you, scared of not being able to give you the life you deserved. So I ran, and I've regretted it every single day since." His confession struck a chord deep within her. For the first time, she began to see glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had listened to her dreams, supported her ambitions, and made her feel valued. He wasn't perfect, and neither was his explanation, but it was clear he was trying. That counted for something, didn't it? "Regret doesn't fix everything," Sarah said quietly, wiping her tears. "Words are easy, Ethan. It's actions that matter." "I know," he replied, nodding fervently. "And I'm willing to prove it. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'll show you that I've changed." Sarah studied him carefully, weighing his words against the pain he had caused. Part of her still wanted to push him away, to protect herself from getting hurt again. But another part, a small, stubborn part, wanted to believe him. She had spent years holding on to anger, letting it define her. Wasn't it exhausting? Didn't she deserve a chance at happiness even if it meant taking a risk? "Fine," she said finally, her voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. "If you're serious about making amends, then start by helping me with something real." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Anything? What is it?" "My dream," Sarah explained, gesturing around the diner. "Remember how I used to talk about opening my own cafe? Well, I'm closer than ever, but I still need help. Financially, practically, I need guidance. If you're truly sorry, if you really want to make things right, then help me achieve this. Prove to me that you mean what you say. Ethan's face lit up with determination. Of course. I'll do whatever you need. Consider it my first step toward earning your trust back. Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into supporting Sarah's dream. He introduced her to influential people in the food industry, helped her secure funding, and even assisted with designing the layout of her cafe. At first, their interactions were awkward, filled with lingering tension and unresolved emotions. But as they worked together, something shifted. Slowly, tentatively, they began to rebuild their connection. One conversation, one shared laugh, one small victory at a time. One afternoon, while reviewing blueprints for the cafe, Sarah turned to Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really?" Ethan paused, meeting her gaze. "Because I owe it to you. Because I want to be the person you believed I could be. And because—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because I still care about you, Sarah. More than you'll ever know." Sarah looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. She wasn't ready to admit it, but she cared about him too. Not the version of him who had abandoned her, but the man who was standing before her now, humble, sincere, and determined to make amends. Their journey was far from over. Trust wouldn't return overnight and old wounds wouldn't heal easily. But for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, their story wasn't destined to end in heartbreak after all. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city. Inside the diner, two people stood side by side, working toward a common goal. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was certain: they were taking steps forward, together. Weeks turned into months, and Sarah and Ethan's partnership grew stronger, not just in terms of building her cafe, but also in repairing their fractured relationship. At first, Sarah kept Ethan at arm's length, wary of letting him too close. She reminded herself daily that his actions were what had broken her heart years ago, and forgiveness wasn't something she could rush into lightly. But as they worked side by side, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in Ethan, changes that made it harder for her to hold on to her anger. Ethan was different now. Gone was the ambitious young man who prioritized success over everything else. In his place stood someone humbler, more patient, and deeply committed to making amends. He listened intently to Sarah's ideas, respected her vision for the cafe, and never once tried to impose his own opinions. When challenges arose, whether it was securing permits or dealing with contractors, Ethan tackled them head-on, using his resources and connections to smooth the way. Yet despite his efforts, he never acted like he was doing her a favor. Instead, he treated every task as a shared responsibility, emphasizing that this was her dream, not his. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of finalizing interior designs, Sarah and Ethan sat together in the nearly finished cafe. The space was starting to come alive with warm lighting, cozy furniture, and shelves lined with books and potted plants. It was exactly how Sarah had envisioned it, a haven where people could relax, connect, and feel at home. As they sipped cups of tea, Sarah glanced around the room, feeling a swell of pride. "You've done an incredible job," Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "This place is going to be amazing." "It's not just me," Sarah replied softly, glancing at him. "You've helped a lot. More than I expected." Ethan smiled faintly, though there was still a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I'm glad I could help. But don't forget, I'm the one who owes you, not the other way around." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I know, and I appreciate it. But helping me with the cafe doesn't erase what happened between us, Ethan. You can't buy your way back into my life." "I'm not trying to," Ethan assured her quickly. "I understand that trust has to be earned. I'm just grateful for the chance to prove myself." His sincerity touched Sarah, though she didn't say so aloud. Over time, she had come to realize that Ethan wasn't the same person who had walked out on her years ago. He carried guilt openly, wore his regret like a badge, and genuinely seemed to want to change. Still, rebuilding trust wasn't easy. There were moments when old wounds resurfaced, triggered by memories or comments that hit too close to home. One such moment came during a meeting with potential investors. Ethan had invited several high-profile business people to tour the cafe before its opening. Among them was Richard Langley, the venture capitalist who had funded Ethan's tech startup years earlier. As they walked through the space, Richard praised Sarah's vision and complimented Ethan on his generosity in supporting her dream. "It's inspiring to see someone use their success to uplift others," Richard remarked, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Not everyone would do that." Ethan forced a polite smile but didn't respond. Later, as the group left, Sarah confronted him. "What was that about?" she asked sharply. "Are you helping me because you genuinely care, or because you're trying to make yourself look good?" Ethan looked taken aback. "Neither," he said firmly. "I'm here because I believe in you, Sarah, because I want to see your dream succeed. Whatever anyone else thinks doesn't matter." "Doesn't it?" Sarah shot back. "Because it feels like you're using this whole thing to ease your conscience, to fix your image after leaving me." "That's not fair," Ethan countered, his voice rising slightly. "Yes, I feel guilty for what I did. I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But my reasons for being here go beyond that. I want to be part of your journey, not because I owe you, but because I care about you." The intensity of his words silenced Sarah. She wanted to argue further, to push him away and protect herself from getting hurt again. But deep down, she knew he was telling the truth. His actions spoke louder than any apology ever could. He had shown up consistently, supported her without judgment, and put her needs ahead of his own. Slowly, painfully, he was earning her trust back. As the weeks passed, their dynamics shifted. They began spending more time together outside of work, revisiting places they used to frequent, the park where they took long walks, the bookstore where they browsed novels, and even the diner where their story had begun. Each outing felt like stepping back in time, yet everything was different now. They weren't the same people they had been years ago. They had grown, evolved, and learned from their mistakes. One chilly autumn evening, as they strolled along the riverfront, Sarah finally broke the unspoken barrier between them. "Why did you really come back, Ethan?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. Was it guilt? Regret? Or was it something else? Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. For a moment he hesitated, searching for the right words. Then, with unwavering honesty, he said, "It was all of those things and more. Yes, I felt guilty for leaving you. Yes, I regretted every decision that led me away from you. But most of all, I missed you, Sarah. I missed us. I thought I could move on, but no amount of success or wealth could fill the void you left behind." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them away. "Do you think we can ever go back to the way things were?" "No," Ethan admitted, shaking his head. "We can't. Too much has changed, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we can build something new, something stronger, something based on honesty and mutual respect." Sarah considered his words, her heart torn between fear and hope. Could they truly start over? Or was it foolish to believe they could overcome the pain of the past? She didn't have answers, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where Ethan might play a role, not as the man who abandoned her, but as someone who had grown alongside her. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the cafe early to prepare for its grand opening. As she arranged flowers on the tables and adjusted the artwork on the walls, Ethan walked in carrying a box of supplies. Without hesitation, he rolled up his sleeves and joined her, working tirelessly until everything was perfect. By mid-afternoon, the cafe buzzed with excitement. Friends, family, and curious locals filled the space, marveling at the cozy atmosphere and sampling freshly baked pastries. Amid the chaos, Sarah found Ethan standing near the counter, watching her with a quiet smile. She approached him, her expression thoughtful. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. Ethan nodded, his eyes softening. You deserve this, Sarah. Every bit of it. As the day drew to a close and the last customers left, Sarah and Ethan stood together in the empty cafe. The air smelled of coffee and cinnamon, and the glow of fairy lights cast a warm light over the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sarah turned to Ethan, her voice steady but filled with emotion. We're not fixed yet, she said. There's still a lot to work through, but I think I'm ready to try, to give us another chance. Relief washed over Ethan's face, followed by gratitude. I won't let you down, Sarah. Not this time. And as they stood there, surrounded by the fruits of their labor, both knew they were embarking on a new chapter, one built on redemption, resilience, and the fragile yet powerful promise of second chances. Outside, the city twinkled with lights, oblivious to the quiet transformation taking place inside the cafe. Inside, two people held on to hope, determined to rewrite their story, not as victims of their past, but as architects of their future. The grand opening of Sarah's cafe marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life, and in Ethan's too. For weeks after the event, the cafe became a local favorite, drawing customers from all corners of the city. People loved its cozy ambiance, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the friendly service that made them feel like family. But for Sarah, the cafe represented more than just a business venture. It symbolized resilience, hope, and the courage to dream again. And Ethan, he was an integral part of that journey. Ethan didn't take credit for the cafe's success. He knew it was Sarah's hard work and vision that had brought it to life. Still, his support had been invaluable, from securing permits to introducing her to suppliers. He had done everything he could to ensure her dream came true. Yet, as much as he wanted to be involved, he also understood the importance of stepping back when needed. The cafe was Sarah's space, her creation, and he respected that completely. In the months that followed, their relationship continued to evolve. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight, but progress was steady. They spent hours talking about their dreams, fears, and regrets, and slowly, they began to heal together. There were still moments of tension, times when old wounds resurfaced and tested their patience. But instead of pushing each other away, they chose to confront those challenges head-on. They learned to listen without judgment, to apologize sincerely, and to forgive when necessary. One crisp spring morning, Sarah stood behind the counter, arranging pastries on a display tray. The cafe was bustling with activity, students typing, away on laptops, couples sharing lattes, and families enjoying breakfast. As she glanced around the room, her eyes landed on Ethan, who sat at a corner table reading a book. He looked up and caught her gaze, offering a small smile before returning to his page. Seeing him there filled her with warmth. She remembered the days when seeing Ethan would have triggered anger or sadness. Now, however, his presence brought comfort. Over time, she had come to trust him, not because he was perfect, but because he had proven himself through consistent actions. He had shown up when she needed him most, supported her unconditionally, and never stopped trying to make amends. Later that afternoon, as the lunch rush died down, Sarah joined Ethan at his table. "What are you reading?" she asked, nodding toward the book in his hands. "It's about entrepreneurship," Ethan replied, closing the cover. "But honestly, I'm not really focused on it. My mind keeps drifting." "Oh yeah? To what?" "To us," he admitted, his voice soft. "To how far we've come since everything fell apart." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "It hasn't been easy, has it?" "No," Ethan agreed. "But nothing worth having ever is, and I wouldn't trade this for anything." His words lingered between them, carrying a weight that spoke volumes. Sarah smiled faintly, then leaned forward slightly. "Do you think we'll ever fully move past what happened, or will it always be there, lurking in the background?" "I think some scars never fully fade," Ethan said honestly. "But I don't see that as a bad thing. Those scars remind me of how much I lost, and how lucky I am to have another chance." Sarah studied him carefully, searching for any hint of insincerity. When she found none, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. Forgiveness hadn't come easily. It had taken months of effort, vulnerability, and patience. But she finally realized that holding on to resentment wasn't serving her anymore. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to focus on the present and the future rather than dwelling on the past. As summer approached, the cafe became even busier. Sarah hired additional staff to handle the growing number of customers, and Ethan helped train them, ensuring they understood the values Sarah had instilled in the business. Together, they created a welcoming environment where everyone felt valued and appreciated. Locals began referring to the cafe as the heart of the neighborhood, a testament to its impact on the community. One evening, after closing the cafe, Sarah and Ethan took a walk along the riverfront. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They strolled quietly, enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't left?" she asked, her tone reflective. "All the time," Ethan replied. "I think about the life we could have built together, the laughter, the challenges, the memories. But I also know that we wouldn't be here now if I hadn't made that mistake. Sometimes losing something is the only way to truly appreciate it." Sarah nodded, understanding his perspective. "I used to hate you for leaving," she confessed. "But now, I think I understand why you did it. That doesn't mean I condone it. It hurt me deeply, but I can see how much you've changed. You're not the same person anymore. And neither are you," Ethan added. "You've grown so much, Sarah. You're stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever. I'm proud of you." His compliment caught her off guard, and she blushed slightly. "Thanks," she said softly. "That means a lot." They continued walking until they reached a bench overlooking the water. Sitting down, they watched the ripples dance under the fading light. After a while, Ethan turned to Sarah, his expression serious. "There's something I need to say," he began. "Something I should have said a long time ago." "What is it?" Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. "I love you," Ethan said simply, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "I never stopped loving you. Even when I convinced myself it was for the best, even when I tried to move on, you were always in my heart. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. This time, they were tears of joy. She had waited years to hear those words, to know that she was cherished, valued, and loved. Reaching out, she took Ethan's hand, intertwining their fingers. "I love you too," she whispered, "and I believe in us, in our ability to build something new, something beautiful." Ethan smiled, relief washing over him. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close as the world seemed to fade away around them. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Just the two of them, united by love, forgiveness, and the promise of a brighter future. Over the next few months, Sarah and Ethan's bond grew stronger than ever. They celebrated milestones together. The cafe's first anniversary, the launch of a new menu, and countless quiet evenings spent planning for the future. They faced challenges too, but they tackled them as a team, supporting each other every step of the way. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They argued occasionally, disagreed on certain things, but it was real, honest, and built on a foundation of mutual respect. 1 year after the cafe's opening, Sarah decided to expand her business. With Ethan's encouragement, she opened a second location in a neighboring town. The new cafe mirrored the original in design and atmosphere, becoming an instant hit with locals. As the brand grew, so did Sarah's confidence. She realized that her dreams weren't limited to one cafe. They extended far beyond, fueled by passion and determination. Through it all, Ethan remained by her side. Not as a billionaire benefactor, but as her partner, friend, and greatest supporter. He attended ribbon-cutting ceremonies, brainstormed ideas during late-night strategy sessions, and even pitched in during busy shifts. His humility and dedication earned him the respect of Sarah's staff and customers alike. On a cool autumn evening, Exactly 2 years after the cafe's grand opening, Sarah and Ethan stood together outside the original location. The neon sign flickered softly above them, casting a warm glow over the sidewalk. Inside, the cafe buzzed with laughter and conversation, a testament to its enduring charm. "Remember when we first started this journey?" Sarah asked, glancing at Ethan with a playful smile. "How could I forget?" Ethan replied, chuckling. "You hated me at first." "I didn't hate you," Sarah corrected, nudging him lightly. "I just didn't trust you." "Well, you trusted me enough to give me a second chance," Ethan said, his tone turning serious. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I deserve it." Sarah leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You already do." Together they gazed at the cafe, marveling at how far they had come. What had begun as a humble diner waitress's dream had transformed into a thriving business and a love story that defied the odds. Through pain, perseverance, and redemption, Sarah and Ethan had proven that even broken stories could find happy endings. As they walked away hand in hand, the city lights twinkled around them, casting a golden glow over the streets. Their journey had been anything but smooth, but it had led them to a place of healing, growth, and renewed hope. And in that moment, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and the warmth of their love, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. The end.